Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Thank you very much for staying with me. Before I start the presentations, I would like to introduce myself to you. My name is Miftal Hamim, together with my second author, Kuko Lukianto, and our third author, Yosef Kusuma. We are going to present our paper under the title, The Material Development in Teaching English for the First Semester Student at Private University in Malang. Let's check it out. Okay, everyone. As a human being and social creature, it is undeniable that humans need to interact with each other. Language emerges itself as a tool of communications among certain groups in society to socialize, to share information, and also get information across nation boundaries and to find resources for some researchers. To comprehend it, a language learner need to follow certain steps of language learning and involve themselves in language class. In fact, language learning is not as easy as people imagine. How does it come? Because there are several affecting factors that define the success of teaching and learning language. What are they? As I've already mentioned before, everyone, in language learning, there are at least three components need to pay attention. They are teachers, students, and also material. How do they play important role? First, teacher. Teacher becomes the facilitator and run the class flow. They initiate the students' interactions and bring the activities in the class. Meanwhile, student is the subject of language learning. The class activities are designed and addressed in order to achieve the student's goal. Meanwhile, the material plays at the source of the language learning. Its suitability with students' need become one key factors in the success of language learning. Thus, let's try to focus on the material as it becomes the topic of this paper. Okay. The use of suitable material to teach is also a supporting factor leading to success of language acquisition. It was explained by Tomlinson in 2001 that material includes anything which utilize to facilitate the language learning. They mostly come in linguistic, visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Even they are in the form of printed material, live performance, and display on cassette or the internet resources. To understand why we need to present the material and develop the material, let's go back a little bit about the goal of language learning. In a setting of language learning, there must be a certain goal need to achieve by students facilitated by the teachers, preceded by the questions, why certain people or community need to learn language? Teacher then formulate the goal of language learning. To do so, teachers need to consider several things in setting the goal in language learning. The first is students' background. The second one is students' character. And the third one is the syllabus being used in the class. Now let's move on. As I've already mentioned before, that learner characters become one key to set the goal of language learning. Stern, in 1983, listed the key characters of learner as related units. They are first, interest, means that different occupations bring different specifications to the language focus. The second one is mother tongue. This mother tongue may affect in the difficulties of teacher in analyzing the pronunciations because there are some area which cannot pronounce something clearly. It's quite different with the other, and while the other can get the understanding and practice the pronunciation really well. So that the learner characters might be depending on the mother tongue of the language learner. The third one is about the motivations. Language learner motivations will also affect the source of learning. Students with high motivations usually get bigger chance in comprehending language. The next is about aptitude. The proficiency of people is unique, everyone. Some people might be good at language while getting difficulties in understanding math, just like what I do, what I experience. Maybe it is easy for me to study about language rather than study about number. Teacher should adjust the teaching method and material in particular way to overcome the differences and cope every single student in the class. The next one is age. The topic of material development is also defined from the age. The young learner might get easy to understand about the language because there are not many things they think in their mind. Meanwhile, undergoing learner might be different. They tend to be difficult in remembering about some terms or even the practice of language. And also, teachers need to consider the method they use to teach based on the students, whether they are in a young age or they are in uh, old age. The next is level of proficiency in English. The better of language comprehensions possessed by the learner, the easier teacher employing the material. As I have already mentioned before, it becomes the background of the student. When they have enough background of English, of course, it is very easy for them to conquer the language. Meanwhile, for those who never get in touch with English, it is suggested for them to study from the very beginning rather than leaping in the advanced one. The next one is academic and educational level. This will help the teacher in defining the content, topic to teach, method, and material to be delivered. The questions then appear. How teachers develop the English material for semester student? As it becomes the topic in this study, as we know that there are some transitions need to be done by the first semester student since they move from senior high school into university level. Okay, to do so, the researcher try to use the qualitative method in this study. Okay, the next, after we discuss about learner characters, that becomes one key point in dividing the goal of language learning. The next is about coverage of the syllabus. Richards and Roger in 1985 that they offer the helpful framework of syllabus comparing the teaching method in language. There are three terms they offer: approach, design, and procedure. Approach refers to the guideline in teaching as an opening to the process of teaching and learning language. Meanwhile, design explain on the process where the first thing that is syllabus is realized into more practical thing on teaching. Meanwhile, the third one or the last one, procedure, refers to class management and technique in teaching employed by language teacher. Okay, as I mentioned before, that to cover all the questions that might become the topic of this study, the researchers try to use qualitative method in this study. Now it's time for us to discuss about research method and subject. Okay, to answer the questions, qualitative research method is used in this study, where it studies certain phenomena existing in society to study without manipulating any numerical data. So that the researcher doesn't use any counting software or even the teacher doesn't count any numerical data. What become the concern of the researchers here is the phenomenon which happens in the class of language learning. Moreover, it focuses on the material development done by teachers for the first semester student in private university. Okay, there are at least 3 teachers of English coming from 3 private university who become the subject of this study. Then, how to collect the data in this research? Researchers use observations and also interview as the research instrument. In order to collect the data, observation is employed in order to get the preliminary data, ongoing data, ordering data, and the class progress related to the language learning. Meanwhile, the interview is done in order to clarify and get additional data which is not found in the observations. So both of them are intended to complete each other. And also the interview was mainly done to clarify the data found in observations and to get information more detailed on the phenomenon that is happening in the class. Now, let's talk about the main core of our research here, about finding and discussions. After doing observations and interview, it was found that in material development, teachers of first semester students in private universities conduct three phases in developing the material. They are adapting, and evaluating material. What are they? The further explanations will answer the questions. Okay, now let's come to material adaptations. This is the first phase of the students, not the student. This is the first phase of teachers in material development. The first phase is material adoptions. In material adoptions, teachers employ the steps as follow. First, teachers are necessary to describe what he desires for the types of the material based on the topic in the class. The second one is that material which have been found should be located or kept in case it might be useful for another topic in the class. The third one is the material which have been kept, as I've mentioned before, it should be reviewed and listed the material based on the related topics in the class. And the last is eliminate irrelevant material. In the last phase of these adoptions, that teachers try to eliminate irrelevant material. This was done to simplify the work of the teacher. So in material adoptions, teachers don't do any modification to the material unless the eliminations of unrelated material. The only thing that teachers do is that collect the resources, match with the topic needed in the class, list them, eliminate an irrelevant data. That's all. Then, what about the material adoptions? Adaptation, I mean. Teacher in material adaptations do the material congruence in the process. It is done by selecting the material which is related to the field of study and modify it based on the syllabus. By doing it, teachers unconsciously have taken the congruence. It can be said that the material adaptations is the next step of material adoptions, where the possible material is kept and used based on the topic. Meanwhile, in material adaptations, teachers employ modification in accordance to the syllabus. Next, this will be the last phase of material development done by the teachers of the first semester student in English subject at private university in Malang. There will be two kinds of material evaluations done by the teachers, namely external evaluations and internal evaluations. After doing the material adaptation and adaptations, teachers do material evaluations. This material evaluation was divided by two phases, as I've already mentioned before, that is, external evaluations and internal evaluations. Now, let's talk about external evaluations. External material evaluations provide an overview of the material from the side of other factors, such as cover, introductions, table of content, and beside, there are some external factors teachers need to consider. Not only about cover, not only about introductions, not only about table content, but also another things. On external evaluations, need teachers do the external evaluations. What are they? Okay, the first is the use of material in core or complementary subject. So teachers need to decide whether the material is used for core subject or complementary subject. The second one is the availability of the material needs to print or has been available. Teacher also needs to consider whether the material is available or teachers need to print it out. The third is the list of vocabulary index. Sometimes when you can find that the book consisting the vocabularies list at the back page of the book. Next is the appearance of the book. Is it colorful or monochrome? For certain people, the colorful book might be more interesting rather than monochrome book. It should be also the considerations because it will attract more attention to the student if the book is colorful mostly. And the next is the organizations of the layout. How do the layout is settled in the book so that it will relate to the tidiness of the book itself. Next is internal evaluations. The next step of material evaluations is internal evaluations. The main progress of this phase is to make sure that the coherence of external factors with internal factors. Teachers need to consider the skill presentations in the material, whether the material in the resources is good or not, clear or not, the sequencing of the material, where the topic starting from the easiest one to the most difficult one, the appropriateness of the sentence consisted in the text, and the next is the authenticity of the recording in the listening. Sometimes the copy of the book might consist of very bad quality of recording, then we have to pay attention to that. The next is the adaptability of speaking material with the real environment, whether the book employ the real environment society, setting, and also context based on the field of study from the students. And the next is the exercise connectivity between student need and also the material, whether the exercise which is available on the book is related to the topic being discussed or even related to the needs of the students. The next is the scope of the material among different styles of language learning. And the last one is the clarity of the material both for student and teacher, whether the book can be understood by the teachers and also the student. Some of the book might be very easy for teachers, but also, on the other side, it is very difficult for the student. We might avoid that since that it will be good for one side only, but it is not good for another side. Remember that the process of learning, it is not intended for teachers only, but also for students, because as we have written before, that student is the subject of language learning. Now, after knowing that there are at least 3 phases of material development done by teachers, now let's try to come into conclusions. Based on the discussions above, it can be said that the teachers of English in private university in Malang use 3 steps in material development. First, material adoptions is done to submit all related material from textbook or another sources to use. The second, material adaptation relates to the development of material adoptions. This is done by selecting the possible material which had been gathered on the material adoptions and do some modifications on it, which relate to the topic of the discussions in the class. And the last, the evaluations. The teachers evaluate the related material considering several factors. They are the related material, the order of the material, the related appropriateness among the skill, and the coherence between the exercise and the material available. Well, everyone, I think enough for my presentations. I'm so sorry during my presentations I do some mistake. I do hope that it will enlighten you to understand about the paper that I write on this conference. Thank you very much. Have a nice day and see you next time.